So, a few years ago now, my high school girlfriend and I were having some problems, and long story short, we broke up. I had just moved into the city for school, and I didn't know anybody. I was sad because I had just gotten in a relationship. I was excited because I had a world full of possibilities in front of me, basically. But I was also pretty scared. Now, this fear had been something I've been dealing with for most of my life, and that was the fear of women. I was always really scared that I'd get made fun of behind my back, or worse, to my face. I had had that happen a couple of times in high school, so I was on edge all the time. I'd say more seriously, though, I was scared of coming across as creepy or like a weirdo. I cannot overstate to you guys just how bad this was for me back then. It's bad for all of us, even my friends. All of my friends have the same fear. Around that time, also, I was not particularly secure in myself. I was a pretty insecure guy, even though I didn't think I was back then. But looking back on it now, I can definitely see some traits in myself that didn't necessarily exude confidence. For example, I had a group of friends back in the day, back a few years ago, and there was probably about 3 or 4 girls in that group. I had met them in a chemistry course my first semester of university, just after I broke up with my girlfriend. So we were sat down at the school library, all of us, and eventually the rest of them got up to go get lunch, all but one of them. So here I was, left with this girl who I didn't really know that well, and I was trying to make a good impression. Not because necessarily I wanted her or I was interested in her. That's mostly because she had a long-term boyfriend at the time. I think her and her then boyfriend were together for like 4 or 5 years at that point. But nonetheless, I wanted to make a good impression for her friends that I knew she had. So anyways, the way I went about doing that was basically bombing her about every cool fact about me. I sat there for like 30 minutes straight, just like listing off every cool thing or everything that I thought was cool about me. And for some reason, I thought that would like wow her, sweep her off her feet, and so to speak, and the word would get around to her friends that I was this really cool guy who had all these interesting facts about him. In reality, I'm almost certain that it just came across as some insecure guy begging to be loved. Fast forward a few months, and I turned 19, which in Canada means that I can drink, and therefore go downtown. So naturally, me and all my friends were downtown around the bars and the clubs multiple times a week, as much as we possibly could. At least if I got the attention of a girl, I could at least feel loved for like a half hour at most. I could feel some inkling of care. But in saying that, I had absolutely no ability to talk to girls whatsoever. Most of my action just came from being in the right spot at the right time, you know what I mean? Just like a group of my buddies next to a group of girls, and somehow by the forces of nature we end up intermingling, and the rest is history. And of course there was always the girl that would be dancing with me for a bit, and the instant I go and get like a drink or something, or go have to use the washroom, the instant I leave her, essentially, and she's with some other guy. And I know that's kind of part of the game when you're at these places, but that broke my heart more than I'm willing to admit. But without the alcohol, and without being absolutely hammered out of my mind, I had zero ability to talk to any girls whatsoever. At least with the alcohol, if a girl came around me, I could sort of play it cool and not be weird. But without it, I was useless. I was a man who deeply wanted to be cared for and given attention, and it was to the point where any girl that showed any inkling of interest in me whatsoever, even if they were to ask a question about myself, I'd get so excited and just basically love bomb them. I wasn't being true to myself, and I think the reason for that is, at least in a large part, is because I didn't think I was good enough for any of these girls. Anyways, some more time passes, and we reached the summer of 2022. And there was this girl who I was really interested in at the time, and we had had a few interactions prior to that. My parents kind of knew her parents, so we loosely knew each other. But I was really into her, and in the few interactions we had, it kind of maybe seemed like she was interested in me too. Most of my reasoning for that is because she just asked me more questions than like a normal person would in a normal interaction. You know what I mean? So I had a pretty good impression from the whole sort of situation based upon the few interactions we had. I was pretty hopeful. And that only increased when one summer night she added me on one of my socials and asked if I knew of anybody in the area that could give her and her friend a ride back from a restaurant they were at. So obviously, I'm not going to offer up somebody else to do the job. I immediately jumped at the offer, and she agreed. So the evening time rolls around, and I get the text to come and get them, and I pick them up, bring them back to their house, and things go great. At least I thought they did. She asked me a bunch of questions on the way back, and things were going well. The conversation was good. There wasn't really any awkward silence at all. So I left that interaction feeling pretty good about it all. She added me on the rest of my socials, and we proceeded to talk for a little bit after that. But once we got to talking on Snapchat, I could tell things were not going anywhere. The conversation was super one-sided on, I guess, my behalf. I was the one doing all the talking. She seemed completely uninterested in me, and I was pretty devastated about it all. So we stopped talking, and that's the end of that, really, for a little while. Looking back on it now, I can pretty much see why I went wrong. At the time, like I said, I thought the car ride went well, but I was not being myself. I was putting on a performance, trying to be some overly silly, goofy guy, cracking all these jokes, and for some reason I thought that would be better than just being myself. So essentially I just faked my personality for like a half hour and said some weird things and in doing so I'm pretty sure I turned her off. So it wasn't very long after we stopped talking that I kind of realized all this after reflecting on it a bit, and as a consequence of that, my fear of women grew worse. Shortly after that whole ordeal, I found myself back downtown with a guy I knew from high school. Now this guy was a few years older than me, and I hadn't seen him in a few years. I didn't really know him that well, but I knew him well enough to have a drink with him, so that's what we did. We got shots, had a few drinks, got pretty drunk, and just tore up the dance floor. So the night progresses, and we find ourselves at a table off the dance floor a little bit. I thought that the night was going pretty well for myself. I mean, I wasn't struggling to find girls, but I guess he thought differently. So, like the true gentleman he was, he decided that it would be in my best interest if he went up to a couple girls at the end of a hallway, probably about 20 feet away, and tried to talk to them and swindle them over on my behalf. I did pretty much everything I could in an extremely loud nightclub to get this man to not do that. But despite my best efforts, he proceeded. So he walks up to these girls, and they're kind of immediately uncomfortable because he comes up behind them. And anyways, I can see him talking to these girls, and I don't know what he's saying because he's like 20 feet away from me. But at one point he turns and he points at me. So I'm kind of there. I'm there at the end of the hallway with a beer in my hand, just kind of like waving back to these girls. And he's pointing at me, and they're kind of clearly weirded out. And it almost certainly looks like I just sent him to go talk to them and kind of be like, hey, my friend thinks you're cute. What do you guys think? So, in my efforts not to look like a coward, I walk over, and the first thing they say to me is, what the f*** do you want? So that was obviously the best scenario. That was the best way that could have gone. And I kind of walked away with my tail between my legs. And that was pretty much the apex, or like the peak, of how bad my fear of women got. Because at that point, I'd felt like the scum of the earth. I'd felt like a complete weirdo and creep. Because these two innocent girls minding their own business, kind of just got, I guess, harassed by me and my friend. But anyways, I felt like a complete weirdo, and my ability to talk to women, what was left of it, was completely gone at that point. Even when I was drunk, I was so scared. So about, I'd say 2 or 3 weeks after that incident, I'm back downtown again. So I'm in the corner of the club with my buddies this time, my actual buddies. We're dancing, we're having a good time, we're drinking beer, things are good. The night's kind of getting started, the crowd's coming in. And lo and behold, who walks in but the girl that I gave a ride home like a month ago at this point. The girl who I had a massive crush on. So here I am with my worsened fear of women, terrified. But despite how scared I was in that moment, I was kind of hopeful because now I could redeem myself to some extent, or I could try to. So I see them walk in, and they go to the bar and they get their drinks, and for a while we're on complete opposite ends of this club. And then there's one point in the night where I'm in the corner and I start to see them walk across the club. And like I said, they're at the precise opposite end of the club. I mean, we're in one corner and they're at the complete opposite corner. It's her and her friend. And this is no small task to walk across this club either. I mean, this is not like some sort of accidental thing that they're pulling off. I mean, at this point, the nightclub's packed. There's hundreds of people probably. And so they have to push through this crowd of people to get to where we are. So here we are watching these girls come across the nightclub. And eventually, after a few minutes of persisting through this crowd of people, she winds up directly behind me. So she stood behind me, her and her friend, and we're all dancing, and we're back onto each other. I mean, like we're literally almost touching backs. Like we are that close. And you might be saying to yourself, well, this is your chance, man. This is what you've been waiting for. And to that I say no. I thought it was my chance, but what did I do? I did nothing. I acted like she didn't exist. I ignored her entirely because I was so scared of women at that point after everything that had happened. I couldn't even stand the thought of even turning to talk to her because I thought that she thought that I was a weirdo and a creep, and these two other girls a couple weeks prior had said the same things basically. So here I was convinced that I was a weirdo, and I didn't want to ruin her image of me any further. So that's what I did. I just stood there the whole night while she was right behind me, and I did nothing. Despite all this, though, there is hope for the dating landscape, as rough as it may be. Most of us are scared of women. So what does this mean? It means that most guys aren't going up and talking to girls. And the guys that do are getting the girls. The bar is so low that it's so easy to stick out from the rest of us, right? It's so easy to get ahead of most other guys. My point is with all this is that you don't have to be scared of women. There's no secret pickup lines or tricks to get women to fall for you. Something I learned is that, all you got to do is treat them like you would anybody else. Just treat them like a human being and not something that you bow down to, you know what I mean? If you can just have a conversation with a woman, just like a normal, everyday conversation, treat her like a human being, and be normal about it, that goes a long way, because, like I said, most guys aren't even doing that. It's pretty much how I ended up meeting my current girlfriend. I mean, I was drunk at the time, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. My point is, before I met her that night, I committed to myself that I would just talk to every girl I could. Treat them just like an everyday stranger. I mean, personally, myself, I've got no problem talking to random guys and carrying on with them and having a good time. And that's pretty much the mindset you have to have with women, too. I mean, there's no secrets, right? It's not that complicated. And the guys that I know who are getting all these girls, sort of disproportionately to the rest of us, they're all the same way. They don't treat girls special. They don't put them on a pedestal and like be weird around them. They just act normal, treat them like every other person. And these guys, by the way, these guys who I'm talking about, these guys are not like chiseled models crafted by the hand of God to make us peasants feel like garbage. Most of these guys are just average dudes. So yeah, I mean, just like I said, act normal around girls, have normal conversations with them, treat them normally, treat them like you would anybody else, like they're human beings and not glorified, put up on some pedestal, you know. Treat them normally, and that'll go a long way. So, anyways, that's my yapping for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching, and I'll see you guys next one.